Welcome to
California
the new
doesn't
era
usually
of video
pound the roof
creation
like
with
this. Rain stitches the
Simply
dark
type your
while I
script to
stand
get
at the window
started.
and watch the street shine. On the counter, my phone won't behave. It buzzes, rests, then trembles again. A preview blinks 3 small words, heavy as a verdict. Call me. I don't open it. The kettle clicks, the porch light hums. Headlights drift past and return, as if the driver lost his courage or found it too late. I breathe slow and count spoons in the drying rack. I remember my rule, old as peace and paid for in long evenings. No decisions after dark. The phone vibrates, edges glowing, like a creature that wants feeding. A drop sneaks through the sash and races the paint. I set a towel and my hand steadies. If this is danger, it will still be danger at dawn. If it is mercy, mercy respects sunrise. I stand at the window because waiting can be a prayer when words would only make weather worse. I turn the screen upside down and let the rain keep time for my heartbeat. I waited. I turned the phone face down and whispered, if this is truth, it can wait for daylight. Asterisk, asterisk, sweetheart, pull your chair close and listen with your good ear. Tonight, we're talking about California rain and unread text, and why I waited anyway. I'll pour the tea. You bring your patience. We'll walk through it slow enough the truth keeps its balance. If stories like this steady your heart, tap, subscribe, and stay with me. I tell one every Sunday at dusk. If you believe families deserve words spoken plain, not shouted, touch the like so this porch light reaches another house. I won't ask for applause. I'll ask for company, because courage grows better when it eats with someone. You'll hear how a little rule, no decisions after dark, kept me from signing away tomorrow to quiet tonight. You'll hear how waiting turned into prayer, and how daylight turned strangers into witnesses. Before you judge my waiting, you need to know what rain used to mean in this house. Asterisk, asterisk, evening comes with instructions my body knows by heart. I tilt the lamp a finger's width so the light pours warm across the table and leaves the corners. The kettle gathers itself on the back burner, a soft hiss like breath before a hymn. I set my phone face down beside the bread tin, flour dusted lid, dented from years of being useful, and I let the room remember our rule. No decisions after dark. I do not keep it on paper. I keep it where my backbone meets my breath. 2 mugs go to the table out of habit. My hands rehearse togetherness, even when the night asks for solitude. I space the mugs like 2 people who know how to listen. Then I stop, feel the tug of old evenings, and lift 1 mug back to the shelf. Habit is loyal. Boundary is loving. I let the empty spot breathe. California rain taps the roof with the confidence of a traveler who believes he has found the right address. It does not usually visit this way, steady, insistent, almost neighborly. Headlights slide along the wet street and make the windows shine. I wipe a ring from the wood and think about the years I tried to solve everything with warmth, ignoring how heat turns thin when it is poured into hurry. I touch the bread tin the way a person tips a hat to a reliable friend. Inside are clipped coupons, pencil notes, and 1 square of index card that holds my best sentence. Daylight decides. I learned it the hard way, which is the only way some truths stick. Once I opened a message at midnight and bargained with shadows. Once I agreed to a plan because the house felt too quiet to argue. Quiet can be kind, but it can also be camouflage. I prefer honesty with sunlight on its face. The kettle begins to sing. I measure leaves into the strainer, count to 5, and pour slow so the steam rises in a ribbon and not a rush. The phone buzzes beneath its glass, like a moth against a lamp. I do not flip it. If the world needs my name tonight, it can make its case to morning. I am not hard, only careful. I learned that from women who kept supper for those who arrive on time, and respect for those who don't. I pull the chair out and sit where I can see the door and the window at once. I think of him, the steady man who taught me to stack receipts and rinse pots before they hardened. I set the second spoon back in the drawer because memory should bless us, not bind us. The rain writes its small literature on the roof. I sip. I wait. Waiting is not emptiness. It is a task, and like any task, it improves with practice. Across the room, the clock declines to hurry. My shoulders find the posture that keeps regret from leaning in. If someone knocks, I will answer with kindness and a porch light, not a pen. If a message arrives, it will rest beside the tin until morning can read it aloud. I do not owe anyone my midnight dot. The table stops trying to be a courtroom and returns to being a place where soup cools and tempers do not. I stroke the grain and feel the nick where a plate once slipped when I was rushing to please. I have fewer nicks now. Rain, lamp, kettle, phone, face down, bread, tin, 2 mugs, and then 1. That is the liturgy of this hour. People think liturgy belongs to churches. It belongs to kitchens, too, wherever promises are kept the ordinary way. I turn the radio to weather and let the announcer say what I already know. The storm is staying. So am I. That rule once saved me, and tonight the rain asked me to break it. I grew up where mornings smelled like percolator coffee and wet hay, and where news traveled by casserole long before it reached the paper. Our house sat 3 doors from the church and 1 block from the Union Hall, so Sunday taught reverence and Monday taught receipts. In the church basement, pies lined the tables like a parade of grandmothers, and a deacon with a loud prayer thanked God for exact change. At the hall, men and women in work shirts spoke in sentences that could lift lumber, fair hours, clean ledgers, names signed in ink. My mother kept the sentence the way some folks keep peppermints in their purse: good fences make good neighbors. She meant kindness with hinges and latches, not walls. Sweep your porch before judging the street. Return borrowed tools with the handles clean. Keep your word as if someone might lean on it. Let silence answer questions that don't deserve breath. She didn't scold much. She demonstrated. After school, I wiped chrome at the diner until I could see my future in it, plain and steady. The bell over the door told the truth about customers. Some entered like weather, some like music. Teachers graded papers over meatloaf. Truckers tipped $1 and a story. On Saturdays, I stocked bins at the hardware store for Mr. Krantz, who taught me the price of nails and the cost of care, and how dust on a shelf tells you whether hands have been busy or idle. American life sounded like wrenches, gospel choruses from the AM radio, and the whistle from the mill. He walked in on a Tuesday with sawdust on his jacket and patience in his posture. He ordered coffee black, said thank you like a handshake, and laughed with his eyes before his mouth found courage. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, he chose verbs that worked. A week later he fixed the sticky bell, paid for a slice of pie he didn't eat, and left a note the size of a compliment. Call if it sticks again. The bell behaved. So did my heart, most days. We courted with quarters and ordinary weather: 1 milkshake, 2 straws, a jukebox button that needed a friendly thumb. We walked home slow enough to hear our shoes agree with the sidewalk. He respected silence the way some men respect coaches. When I told him my mother's mantra, he nodded. Doors with hinges, he said, not barricades. He liked shirts line-dried and his word on time. He kept receipts, folded small and square, because memory is good company until the bill arrives. When the mill cut shifts, we looked west. California sounded like a promise, with palm trees stapled to a brochure: sunlight, steadier work, a school that needed volunteers, rent we could manage if coupons cooperated. Folks said we were chasing a postcard. Maybe we were. A person can chase worse things than light. We packed the cups that never chipped, the radio that knew our stations, and the rule I had begun to carry inside me: decide in daylight. The move taught us the difference between scenery and soil. Where we came from gave us manners and grit. Where we arrived offered second chances and longer evenings. We found a church with a smaller choir and a union hall that spoke familiar grammar. We learned new prices and old truths. Neighbors are currency, and dignity multiplies when you share it. I kept my mother's line close, adjusted for climate. Good fences, yes, but good porches. He built one with patient hands, boards measured twice and cut once, railing just high enough to lean on without inviting a fall. We sat there evenings and listened to sprinklers click like little metronomes of hope. We planned a family in sentences that began with when, not if. Every plan ended at the kitchen table, because tables don't forget. We promised to meet at supper always until the day supper learned how to wait. We learned to wait. Asterisk, asterisk. Marriage began in a rented upstairs walk-up that creaked kindly under our feet. We painted the kitchen the color of warm bread, and set the table with thrift store plates that looked braver together than alone. Paydays smelled like soap and gasoline. Thrift wasn't misery. It was a game we played against the month, and some weeks we won by pennies. I clipped coupons. He stretched lumber, and we learned how to turn leftovers into something that tasted like new hope. The table became our altar. Bills went beneath the salt. Prayers went between bites. News, good, bad, undecided, was spoken in full sentences so no one had to translate mood. Then came the baby, red as sunrise and loud as joy. Sleep arrived in envelopes. Laughter cashed the bigger checks. We measured growth against doorframe pencil marks and measured ourselves against patience. He kissed the soft crown before leaving, and again when he returned. And I built routines, sturdy enough to carry 3. Supper was our bell. No matter what the day had taken, we gathered when it rang. Some evenings stretched, a job ran long, a truck fought its own gears, a favor for a neighbor turned into 2. He'd call late and say, "Don't wait up," and I'd answer, "We'll reheat." At first, the plate kept its heat like a loyal dog. Later, it cooled while I told the child a story and told myself another. That kindness could warm what lateness chilled. He came in grateful, sorry, determined to do better. I believed him because people become the size of your faith. Then small confusions collected like lint in a pocket. A promise a reason trimmed for ease. A missing detail framed as protection. He said it spared me worry. I said I preferred true worry over false peace. We did not fight. We practiced restraint, which is quieter and harder. I learned to listen for the shape of truth, not only its words. He learned that silence has weight, and I would not carry it for him. One winter evening, the stew went slick with a skin while the clock tugged at its hands. I spooned out a bowl, covered the rest, and held the baby until the house accepted we were done for the night. He arrived after the lamp's patience thinned, breath cloudy, apology genuine, explanation light. Another week, it happened again. Habit is a craftsman. It builds whatever you feed it. I counted silence like coins on worn wood and laid a rule along the grain. No decisions after dark. No signatures under pressure. No disrespect at this table. I taped it to my heart. Mercy made room. Math told the truth. The first empty plate taught me mercy. The second taught me math. Asterisk, asterisk, dusk stitched the street into dark ribbons while California rain kept time on the roof. I set my phone face down beside the bread tin, felt the countertop tremble, and pretended it was the kettle. A vibration rolled under my palm again, longer, like a dare learning my name. I flipped the phone, only far enough to see the preview. 3 words, heavy as a verdict, call me. The sender was family, the hour was wrong, and the rain had opinions about both. I did not open it. I have a rule paid for in long evenings. No decisions after dark. The screen dimmed, brightened, then displayed a missed call. I let it pass through me like weather and took the kettle off the heat so the house could hear my choice. The porch light hummed its steady hymn. Headlights slowed outside, swept across the window, and kept going. Somewhere down the block, a garbage can clanged. The neighborhood pretended it wasn't startled. The voicemail icon appeared, small and insistent. I pressed play on speaker because daylight prefers witnesses, even imagined ones. A woman with a script in her throat said she was calling from the clinic, or maybe it was the bank, or the attorney's office. They all used the same varnish. She referenced documents already prepared, decisions already taken, consent presumed. She requested confirmation, signature, acknowledgement, immediacy. Her voice wore politeness like a raincoat, slick enough to shed questions without getting wet. A second buzz arrived before the first sentence ended. A separate message, marching in step. Links, forms, deadlines. I pictured a room with fluorescent lighting, and people who assumed my hush would spend like money. The rain thickened, nudging the gutters toward confession. I set 2 mugs on the table, then returned one to the cupboard because I refused to feed panic. Another text preview flashed. Shorter this time, trying a new route through my resolve. Just sign tonight, we'll fix details later. I took the phone in both hands and felt my pulse. Remember old bargains I will not make again. Later is how quiet grows teeth. Later is how you wake up and find your name has been working nights without pay. I walked to the window and let the storm cool my breathing. Street lamps drew halos on puddles no angel had requested. The bread tin held its corner like a lighthouse. I tapped the lid and heard my mother's sentence. Daylight decides. The house nodded along the rafters. I set the phone face down again and turned the ringer low. If fear needed noise, it could make its own. A car idled at the curb, then drifted forward. The porch steps collected rain like small plans. I poured tea into the 1 mug and laid a towel where the window had learned to leak. My hands steadied. If this is danger, it will still be danger at dawn. If it is mercy, mercy respects sunrise. The message wanted my name tonight in their terms. I waited anyway. The kettle clicked in relief. The clock practiced fairness, 1 second at a time. I breathed until breath believed me. Let them stack papers in rooms that mistake fluorescent light for truth. Let the storm rehearse its drama. Morning would come, and with it, witnesses, pens, and a teeth of rain pressed its palms against the windows, like a child asking to be let in. The bank called at 8:15 with a smile that didn't fit in the receiver. "Just a few signatures to keep things moving," the voice said, cheerful as a dentist. I asked for a daylight appointment in a room with glass and receipts. The voice preferred now. One preferred morning. We understood each other by not agreeing. 8:20 The clinic left a message that sounded kind until it started. Naming forms I had not read and consents I had not given. "It's routine," the woman promised. "Routines are just habits that forgot to ask permission." I hung the dish towel over the oven handle and let the phone rest under the bread tin, like a misbehaving cat. By 9. Neighbors had studied my porch the way people read tea leaves when they run out of real leaves. One waved, "Too long." Another texted a casserole emoji, which is how some folks spell pressure. At 9:30, a relative sent a message that began with love, you, and ended with B. Reasonable. Reasonable often means convenient. For somebody else, I set one mug on the table and then took it back to the shelf. A courtroom requires a gavel. A kitchen requires a spoon. I will not confuse them. The rain argued on the roof in steady paragraphs. I answered with the rule I have paid for in long evenings: no decisions after dark, no pressure at this table, and no signatures that need excuses tomorrow. At 10. A man from the attorney's office tried a polite hurry. He mentioned deadlines the way a magician mentions scarves, something to keep your eyes busy while the trick gets done. "I can swing by with the papers," he said. I told him my porch was for people, not for traps. Daylight, witnesses, printed copies. He tried a chuckle. I tried silence. Silence 1. At 11. The storm squeezed the sky until the gutters confessed. I made soup because soup refuses to be rushed and insists on being stirred in circles. The house calmed its shoulders. The phone tried a fresh tactic. A link, promising convenience. I placed a postcard over the screen and turned back to the stove. Convenience is the road where regret builds tollbooths. Noon carried rumors on its back like damp laundry. Somebody had heard I'd come into money. Somebody else reported I was holding up care. I washed the cutting board and praised God for warm water and small truths. Then I called the bank again and scheduled tomorrow's conversation in a room whose blinds could not be closed without a witness noticing. By afternoon the rain made the world small. My resolve kept the room large. I tidied the table, tucked the index card beneath the salt, and put fresh batteries in the porch light, because symbolism is easier when hardware cooperates. A final message asked for a quick signature to show good faith. Good faith does not hurry the hand that must carry the name. I set one mug down, then took it back up. This table would not be a courtroom. If they wanted an answer, they could meet it at sunrise, with chairs, copies, voices. Tonight, soup and rain had jurisdiction here. Abel that remembers me. Asterisk. By late afternoon, the storm had settled into itself. Less tantrum, more sermon. I put fresh towels by the door and set the broom within reach. A little insurance against what blows in when weather forgets its manners. The phone glowed on the counter like lightning rehearsing. I let it practice without me. A friend, my sink friend, the one who knows where I hide the good sponge, arrived with a face that had rehearsed disapproval. She said she'd heard I was dragging this out, which is what people say when they want your hurry to serve their comfort. She opened with concern and closed with instruction. "If you loved him," she said, "you'd just help." I folded a dish towel that didn't need folding. "I do love him," I answered. "That's why I won't make permanent choices in temporary weather." She glanced at the phone like it was a lifeguard and I was the one refusing to be saved. I told her about my rule, the one I keep in my ribs. Daylight decides. No signatures at night. No pressure at this table. She called it rigid. I called it repaired. She tried scripture without context and stories without receipts. I brewed tea and passed the sugar and let the clock hold its position. "He's scared," she said, as if fear were a credential. I told her fear is a fact, not a judge. She softened, then bristled again, because bristling can feel like purpose. "You used to be easier," she said softly. "For who?" I asked. And the rain answered for us both. We sat on opposite sides of the table like two nations remembering a treaty. She wanted my yes because she loves me, and because a clean narrative sleeps better. I wanted my no because it keeps me. I do not disappear to prove devotion anymore. I do not shrink so others can feel tall. I waited years to sound like this, and I will not talk myself back into vanishing. She asked to see the message. I slid the phone farther away. "Morning," I said. "Screens tell lies at night." She laughed without believing me. I poured more tea and told her about other nights, the first cold plate, the apology that cost me twice, the bargain that unraveled by breakfast. I told her how waiting once saved my name from being rented out to somebody else's hurry. The rain moved across the roof. In long handwriting, we listened. We ate an apple between us and remembered the diner where we learned chrome and honesty. Her shoulders softened the way fabric does when you stop ironing it out of habit. She touched my hand and then the towel and then nothing at all. Suddenly careful with the room. When she left, she placed her palm on the doorframe like a person who has just learned it is load-bearing. "Call me," she said, "when the sun is up." I nodded. After she was gone, the house exhaled and the phone lit the counter like a small storm trapped in glass. I stood, smoothed tablecloth, and slid index card under salt where courage could find it. Waiting is work, I reminded myself. Work deserves witnesses and light. I folded the letter once, then heard footsteps on the porch over the rain. He did not knock like family. He tapped, testing the seam between door and night. I opened as wide as courtesy and as narrow as wisdom. Rain stitched the threshold. His jacket steamed like a plan fresh from sprinting. "We need your signature," he said, skipping greeting for mission. He named a document like a password and a deadline like thunder. He spoke for a committee I had not elected. His eyes swept the table and found the empty place where habit used to sit. "You're making this difficult," he added, as if difficulty were a sin and speed a sacrament. "Water," I offered, pointing to the chair nearest the window. If we were going to talk, we would let the room make us honest. He declined the glass and accepted the chair halfway. He placed his hand on the phone as though possession could equal persuasion. I placed my palm on the table itself and felt the wood remember me. He tried kindness like a key. He tried urgency like a liver. He tried guilt like a coat he could place around my shoulders. I removed each in turn and laid them across the back of the chair like garments we would not need. "Not at night," I said, slowing the syllables so they would not trip. "Not like this." He said the window would close. "Windows do close. They also open in the morning." He said care would be delayed. Care that cannot wait for daylight should not travel by text. He said I was the only obstacle. I told him, a boundary is not an obstacle. It is a door with hinges that keep the house from falling down. The rain deepened into paragraphs. He reached for the phone again. I slid it farther from his fingertips. He stood abruptly, and the chair scuffed the floor in a voice I will sand out later. He spoke louder, as people do when they suspect clarity and fear it. "This is for your own good." "Then it will still be good tomorrow," I answered. "And if it isn't, we'll know whose good it was." The porch light hummed, steady as a choir that refuses encores. I watched his shoulders learn the room would not bend. He pointed at the empty place on the table like it owed him rent. "Sit," I said again, softer this time. He sat, and for a breath the storm lost interest. We went line by line through what little he knew. It amounted to pressure with stationery. I laid out my terms like a recipe. Daylight meeting, witnesses, corrected pages, copies to carry home. He called it drama. I called it housekeeping. He stood again, hand twitching toward the phone like a moth to a quiet flame. I reached to the wall and answered with brightness. The bulb washed the room clean. He blinked in the new weather and found his voice smaller. "Tomorrow then," he muttered, already dialing someone who prefers speed to sense. "Tomorrow," I agreed, in a room with windows. He reached for the phone. I reached for the switch light chose for us. When the door closed, my house settled its shoulders. I set the glass where his hand reached, turned the phone face down, and let rain finish conversation without me. By morning the storm had stalled, a gray engine idling over the valley. The mailbox held a second letter dressed in cream and deadlines. 48 hours, it said, as if numbers could impersonate conscience. It listed consequences like groceries, lost claim, delayed care, assessed fees. It did not list the cost of regret. A voicemail followed with words that had practiced sounding helpful. Windows close, calendars fill, opportunities expire. The message forgot to mention kitchens, or the way soup cools when a clock tries to eat from your bowl. An email chimed, bright as a toy, attaching forms that assumed compliance. A link winked like a shortcut through a field where fences have reasons. I set the envelope on the table and opened the curtains instead. Light performed its quiet audit. I read every line out loud, as if sound might flush snakes from grass. The clauses didn't like daylight. Few bullies do. I underlined verbs, circled omissions, and wrote a list of questions in a hand that refuses to shake for weather. The town watched with the appetite of small places. At the post office, Someone asked if I was managing at the market. A greeting lasted one beat too long. Online, cousins became forecasters. The porch collected opinions that traveled without umbrellas. I brewed coffee and poured half down the sink, deciding the drain deserved better conversation. I called the number on the letter and recited my terms in the voice I used for storm warnings: daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses with pens, corrected paper with square corners, written apology for the shortcut disguised as mercy, public acknowledgement so the rumor mill can rest. The man on the line tried to be soothing and succeeded only in being slow. I asked him to schedule it. He did, one reluctance at a time. Afternoon wore itself thin. The rain made a smaller circle around the house, as if reconsidering its purpose. I set one plate for supper and left the second upright in the cupboard, where patience keeps it company. The phone vibrated again, promising convenience. I answered with the older promise: I trust. I will not sign my name into someone else's hurry. Evening arrived with its familiar weight. I stacked my proofs in the order I would present them: rules, receipts, grace. I tucked the index card on top like a palm held up to a crowd. I breathed the way nurses teach and felt my name settle in my chest where it belongs. Another message rang, late enough to insult. One quick signature to show good faith. It said, "Good faith shows itself by daylight and brings witnesses who can spell." I turned the ringer down and listened to the roof finish a paragraph. I set water to boil and watched the flame behave. If the choice is between being called stubborn tonight and being called fool forever, I choose the word that leaves me sleeping. If I wait, they'll call me cruel. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. So I washed the cup, clicked the porch light on, and let the house take my side. The clock remembered fairness. Tomorrow would have windows and chairs and copies. Tonight would have rain, soup, and a name held steady like a level across the grain. Daylight made the paper blink. We met in a small room with honest windows, a borrowed table, and two witnesses who know how to listen without performing. I set the envelope down like bread and poured coffee that tasted like prudence. The clerk straightened her glasses. The pastor folded his hands and promised to pray with his eyes open. The woman from the office arrived with a folder fat with confidence and thin on humility. We read aloud. The first clause: wore friendly clothes. If no objection appears within a reasonable time, consent may be inferred. Reasonable to whom? The second shifted risk with a magician's flourish. Relief now in exchange for your right to appeal later. The third placed all weight for unanticipated outcomes on the person easiest to push me. In the margin, a smile of legalese promised efficiency. It looked like a shortcut across a field we both knew held ditches. We spread my proofs like a quilt. Timestamps, prior emails, a meeting agenda that vanished in their copy but sat plain in mine. The clerk tapped the missing minutes with her pen. "Convenient," she said softly, not unkind. The pastor hummed something that sounded like conscience clearing its throat. I felt the old tremor in my hands try to return. It did not. I breathed the way nurses teach and heard my mother again. Daylight decides. Shock hardened into clarity. I had not been stubborn. I had been careful. Night had tried to spend my patience like loose change. Morning counted it back, coin by coin. I could sign and silence the thunder, yes, but the storm would set up house in me, or I could stitch this document until it held. Asterisk, asterisk. So I drafted a humane alternative. Same purpose, clean language. Replaced deemed with agreed, assumed with documented. May with shall where duty belongs. Preserve appeal. Remove any inference of consent through quiet. Root payments cleanly with no strings hidden in vows. Require an apology in writing, not to humiliate, but to teach the room how repair becomes real. Published the corrections so rumor can rest. The woman from the office lowered her chin, read line by line, and exhaled a truth she had kept. This is better. The clerk nodded. The pastor, professional at silence, said amen like a stamp. We marked the edits in ink that didn't shake. Authority tilted toward integrity, then settled. I held the pen and did not sign. Not yet. A document can be right and still be lonely until witnesses touch it. I asked for certified copies of the changes and for the corrected draft to meet me at noon, in a room with windows and a copier that works. No hallway approvals. No phone promises. Paper or it didn't happen. I stood at the window and watched the last of the storm slip off the curb like a regret deciding to behave. My reflection looked like a woman I recognized. Not a hero, not a victim, a caretaker of names. I folded the marked pages into the folder, slid the index card on top, and thanked my rule aloud as if it were a neighbor I'd borrowed sugar from. What they called urgency was a shortcut around my dignity. Outside, a delivery truck hissed at the light and a sparrow practiced notes on the sill. The world did not end because I waited. It aligned. I could see the road from impulse to injury, and footbridges keeping people dry. I set my pen down like a promise and scheduled the second meeting. Daylight would finish what daylight began properly. I climbed the attic ladder, the careful way people climb into their own memory. The cedar box sat where I left it, tape label curling, dust like soft advice. Inside were receipts, useful only on days like this: grocery totals, gas slips, a napkin with a date, and two initials that once believed they could outrun time. I sorted by year, then by nerve. On the table I laid out a map made of paper, witness, names, and numbers, minutes from a committee meeting that disappeared in their file but lived in mine, timestamps that showed my no had been clear, and their hurry had been louder, an email thread that ended right before the inconvenient reply. I added the index card from the bread tin because rules are evidence. 2. When a life is on trial for not rushing, gathering proof spends different kinds of courage. The retired clerk answered my call with a voice that knows where cabinets hide embarrassment. Yes, she remembered the draft. Yes, a line had been adjusted for clarity, which means made slippery. The union man texted a scan of an old ledger page and wrote, "Use this if you must. I wish you didn't have to." I phoned the church secretary, brought pie, and asked for the original minutes. She opened a drawer and found them. I printed the screenshots and circled the part where my name declined to be borrowed. I copied the voicemail transcript, the one that smiled while pushing. I wrote a timeline that a tired person could follow without tripping. Each step cost a chip from the jar labeled relationship. I paid exact change in gentleness and promises to return the tools I borrowed. At the bottom of the cedar box, under a folded dish towel, I found a pencil note in his handwriting, not flowery, true. If you must stand alone, stand at our table. I will recognize you there. I cried a small, neat cry that didn't need a witness, and then put the note where it could keep watch. By afternoon the rain remembered. It had somewhere else to be. The gutters sighed. The street brightened the way faces do after someone apologizes. My work did not end with the storm. I stacked the proofs in the order that convinces decent people. Rules, receipts, then grace. The plan looked simple and therefore strong. Daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses, corrections, apology written, announcement public. Funds routed cleanly with no strings pretending to be bars on the counter. The phone flashed a fresh offer. One signature now would unlock everything. I have opened enough doors to know some rooms charge rent you never agreed to. I placed my palm on the folder and felt the papers breathe like a patient before surgery. One signature could end this, or end me. So I set a glass of water for tomorrow's courage, closed the box, and let the house rest around my resolve. Morning would need strength, paper, and steady witnesses. Tomorrow, the ultimatum arrived like weather, a message from a number saved under family, a tone borrowed from bosses, today or never. I set the phone face down and used a cup as a paperweight for worries. The cup did not spill. Neither would I. An email followed that called itself a solution. It offered a smaller number with a larger silence. Quiet settlement, it said, as if quiet were virtue when purchased. I have paid for quiet before. It cost me twice. I replied with the sentence I reserve for pressure-wearing manners. No, thank you. Daylight only. Witnesses present. Correct the paper or correct your aim. Online. Rumor threads sprouted like weeds after a warm rain. A story about greed. Another about stubbornness. Strangers taught me about myself with the confidence that travels cheaply. A cousin reposted, meaning well and meaning wrong. I read until reading turned into rehearsing arguments I would never perform. I closed the lid and let the room be louder than the noise beyond it. The family council tried another approach. Let's keep it in the family, someone said, which is a sentence that has been used to store too many unsolved things. They suggested I sign quietly and we all move on. I reminded them that moving on and moving right are not synonyms. A boundary is not an accusation. It is the condition under which love can be trusted to stay. I set the table for one and practiced compassion as a discipline. I named the fear driving their hurry. I named the fatigue behind their scolding. I forgave the part of them that wants relief more than repair. Compassion without surrender tastes like decent bread. It fills you enough to refuse dessert you didn't order. The pastor checked in and offered his chair for the signing. The clerk texted that the corrected draft was nearly ready. My friend, the one who had cooled, sent a picture of her car keys with the caption, "Ride." Bridges arrive like that, small and practical. I said yes. The rain slipped to a mist that reminded everything of its outlines. I placed my hand flat on the table and felt the wood speak its honest grammar. Hold, steady, keep. I stacked my order for tomorrow rules receipts. Grace and tucked the index card on top like a quiet banner. I am not the villain in my own kitchen. I am the caretaker of names. Another message pinged, soft as a stray spoon in a drawer. It promised convenience again, a link that would tidy the world with a thumbprint. I breathed the way nurses teach and let the sound pass. I have a longer plan than their hurry, and it is written where light can read it. The house listened. The window offered back my reflection, at peace. A woman who has already lived through worse weather and learned where to hang her coat. If they won't sit with Grace, I'll sit with God. I know his hours. He keeps daylight. It was 3 in the morning, the hour when houses tell the truth and the refrigerator sings an old hymn. I kept the lamp low and the room honest. Steam lifted from my mug and lost its nerve halfway to heaven. I sat at the table that has learned more about me than any diary, and folded my hands the way my mother did when she did not want to shake. Lord, I said without saying it, stand between me and my hurry. The quiet took attendance. The clock ticked, polite as a pipe settled. Outside, a truck downshifted 2 streets over, and then remembered it was night. I thought of the first time I set only one plate and felt more peace than loneliness. The way a body feels when a splinter finally works itself free. I had not meant to choose myself. I had simply kept the soup from thinning into apology. The baby had slept. The room had breathed. I had learned the floorboards of my own heart. I remembered other erasures. The "I'm fine" that meant I am disappearing. The smile I wore so a visitor would not have to see his own reflection. The nights I signed my name to quiet I could not afford. Women learn subtraction long before numbers. We remove pieces of ourselves until the sum looks polite. That night taught me the math in reverse. Add back an hour. Add back a breath. Add back a rule you keep even when someone calls it stubborn. I pulled the bread tin close and spread paper like a map. Yellow pad, blue pen, index card asleep under the salt. I wrote my terms in letters that did not blink. Daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses who understand paper, corrected agreement with sharp verbs and square corners, written apology for the shortcut disguised as mercy, public acknowledgement so the town can watch fairness walk upright, funds routed cleanly, without strings hidden in the bow, names spelt right, dates in order, no midnight. I read the list aloud to the lamp and heard my voice steady. A boundary can be a wall when fear builds it. It becomes a bridge when courage keeps the toll. I poured more water and let the kettle ask its soft question. Are you sure? I answered yes in a language that does not require volume. I am sure I am not the villain in my own kitchen. I am sure patience is not passivity. I am sure daylight is the witness that loves me best. I prayed in sentences the size of seeds. Bless the people pushing, because fear has made them clumsy. Bless the people helping, because loyalty can tire. Bless me to stand kind without moving. Then I let the prayer sit like bread rising under a towel. The room warmed around it. The window turned from black to navy to the blue that belongs to nobody but morning. When the first bird cleared its throat, I closed the pen and placed the list on top of the letter, like a mother laying a quilt across a restless child. I put the second plate back in the cupboard with ceremonial care. I set one plate at the place where my hands expect it, and I did not apologize to the chair across from me. My chest loosened. The light decided us. At dawn, I set one plate. It was enough. I breathed, counted 10, and felt my name return, bright, legible, and wholly mine. The house exhaled, and the storm stepped back. Morning made decisions look like furniture, again solid, liftable, worth moving with 2 hands. I ate toast, washed the cup, and lined my proofs in order. I dialed the bank first and asked for a daylight slot in a glass-walled room. I named my witnesses and requested receipts for every promise. The manager tried a tone that keeps carpets feeling important. I answered with the voice I save for stormwarnings.com. Specific, already under a doorway. He gave me 10 o'clock. I called the attorney next. I refused corridors and back offices. Neutral space, I said. Windows open, witnesses seated, corrected language in plain view, Apology drafted on letterhead before pens He suggested convenience. I suggested sunlight. He suggested we could keep this quiet. I suggested we could keep it honest. We agreed on noon. Conference room B, blinds tied up and copier ready. The pastor answered on the second ring. I told him I needed a listener with a backbone. He said that was his weekday job. He would sit, say little, and pray with his eyes open. The clerk texted a thumbs up and a photo of her reading glasses like a small flag. My one school friend offered a ride, which is the apology some people know how to give. I took it. Bridges travel best with company. I reached for the reporter's number and let my hand rest there, not to threaten, but to remember that public truth is a tool I can pick up if private truth is ignored. I wrote a single line beside the entry, only if needed. Then I closed the book on drama and opened the folder on daylight. By 9:30 the plan walked on its own legs. Bank at 10, attorney at noon, pastor and clerk confirmed, friend at the wheel, index card on top of the stack like a firm palm between hurry and harm. I packed water, hard candy, and a pen that writes straight through nerves. I put on the jacket that remembers victories, and the shoes that do not squeak. Before leaving, I stood at the table and touched the empty place where a second plate might have gone. I told it what I tell myself when rooms get loud: kindness first, clarity always, grace when possible, and no signatures after dark. The porch-light slept. The sun was enough. The phone buzzed with a final message wearing bluster like cologne. Today or never. I buttoned my jacket and locked the door. I said, today by my terms. The street nodded, and the day opened like a clean, blank ledger. I walked forward, steady, paper in hand, ready to trade hurry for truth and make daylight keep score. The conference room mistook length for wisdom. A table ran like a runway. The carpet swallowed footsteps, and a pitcher of water tried to look official. I carried my folder the way farmers carry seed, believing that what grows depends on light, care, and clean ground. The bank manager opened with a smile that worked overtime. The attorneys stacked forms as if paper could bluff. I set my proofs where the sun from the high window could read with us. We'll keep this simple, he said. We'll keep this honest, I answered. I laid out the timeline the way a baker lays dough steady, nothing hidden. Call logs, minutes the committee tried to forget, screenshots of threads that stopped one response too early. Then the letterit's neat paragraphs turned clumsy in daylight. I traced the sentence that inferred consent if I stayed quiet. I circled the clause that reached beyond fairness and tried to tap my name like a maple for syrup. The manager frowned first. Who wrote this version? The attorney cleared his throat into a smile. I slid forward my alternative. Same purpose, clean verbs, equal risk, appeal preserved. No midnight favors dressed as mercy. This isn't stubborn, I said. This is housekeeping. If we're going to live with this, let's make the floor level. We read. We slowed on the verbs. We replaced deemed with agreed, assumed with documented, may with shall where duty belongs. The clerk witness adjusted her glasses and tapped numbers that didn't like being tapped. The pastor's silence made space for conscience. The attorney tried one last shortcut. We could proceed and amend later. Years of cooling plates stood up in me and answered, later is how people lose houses and names. Fix first. The manager breathed out a truth escaping a jar. She's right, he said, sounding relieved to recognize his own mouth. He turned to the attorney. Draft it properly. I slid a page across that I wrote at 3A.m. The humane alternative kept care moving now and protected tomorrow from regret. Daylight for decisions, witnesses for memory, appeal preserved for whether nobody predicts, payments routed cleanly, no strings hiding in bows, an apology written knots implied so. The room learns how repair becomes real. And a public notice, because rumor eats in the dark. We marked revisions in ink that did not tremble. Someone fetched a fresh template. The printer coughed and then cooperated. The corrected agreement read like a person with a straight back. The pastor nodded once. The clerk smiled the way a seam looks when it finally lies flat. Before the pens came out, the attorney asked, "Shall we conclude this quietly?" I thought of neighbors who pay attention, of young clerks learning what fairness sounds like, of my own late nights teaching me to wait. We can make this right, publicly or quietly, they said. Publicly, I answered. He winced, then nodded, calculating the cost of decency. The door opened. A family member stood there, brave and brittle, urgency buttoned to his collar. He scanned the table, saw witnesses, and let his shoulders drop. "Are we done?" he asked. I lifted my hand, a small blessing in the air. Almost, I said. Then we go home and act like kin. He began to defend the rush. I spared him the speech. Fear makes people sprint, I said. Form keeps us from falling. The manager pointed at the restored appeal line. This should have been here from the beginning, he said. It is here now. We signed in an order that honored sense, institution, oversight, witnesses, then me. I wrote my name carefully, not large, not small, exactly true. The attorney drafted the apology while we waited. Not poetic, not needed. It named the lapse, the correction, and a commitment to do better in words a clerk can file. I requested certified copies and a digital duplicate for the archive. The manager offered his plain cell number. If anything tilts, he said, call before the hour gets dramatic. I tucked the card behind my index note, where rules keep company with names. At the threshold I paused. One more item, I said. The announcement. The manager nodded. We will publish it clear, specific. Authority tilted toward integrity again, then settled like a table with a wobble fixed. We stepped into afternoon that felt like respect. My jacket felt like mine. The family member matched my stride. Relieved. I thought you wanted to win, he said. I wanted to live with myself, I answered. We walked together. Home. Behind us, the copier cooled, and ahead, the porch light waited. The thing left was telling the town how it ended, not that it ended. We can make this right, publicly or quietly, they said. Publicly, I answered. We left with a document that finally spoke plain. The clerk sealed copies. The manager cued a notice. The attorney stapled his apology to the corrected draft. No speeches, only work done right. In daylight, I rode home in borrowed quiet and set the folder on my kitchen table like bread. I ate lunch like a woman who remembered how to chew. Relief is not a parade. It is a steady fork. A plate that stays warm because you are the one sitting there. The next morning the local paper printed a small notice between Little League scores and a lost dog ad. It named the error and the correction. It did not audition adjectives. At the market, the new cashier slipped me a note that read, "Proud of you, ma'am," then rang the next customer like nothing holy had happened. The librarian paperclipped a fee waiver to a bookmark and whispered, "For the light." I tucked both into the bread tin beside my index card. Money that had hesitated finally moved where it belonged. I paid the bills that had been practicing acrobatics on the desk. I called the carpenter and asked for the porch step the right way, not the fast way. He did it right. I bought tulips with red-tipped petals because dignity deserves flowers. I mailed a quiet envelope to a family that needed groceries and sent a small check to the library with the memo. For light, reconciliations arrived like mail, some on time, some late, some returned once before they found the address. A cousin managed to honest sentences and a cry. I gave her the chair by the window and a napkin for pride. We did not re-argue the storm. We passed sugar and spoke about the weather we actually had. Later, a friend returned my casserole dish with a note. "Thank you for waiting. Waiting is an unglamorous courage." I pinned her note to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. The table resumed its vocation. On Sunday I set to plates, but only when the guest I invited earned the place with daylight, truth, and a willingness to dry dishes. We did not talk documents over food. Afterward, we cleared and spoke in full sentences. He apologized without ornament and asked what repair would look like, not what forgetting would cost. I told him repair is a schedule, not a speech. He said he would keep it. I believed him enough to return one fork to the drawer with his name folded beside it. Not everyone came back. That is not tragedy. That is arithmetic. Some bonds were twined, some were thread, some were silk, stronger than they looked. I fed whoever arrived on time and spoke straight. I left the porch light on for people trying to be better and turned it off for people trying to be louder. Peace returned like a cat that forgives yet remembers the slammed door. Weeks later the paperwork finished its chores. Funds settled. Apologies printed. I filed the final copy and wrote a short letter to myself, then placed it in the tin. You kept your name. Remember this. On restless nights, the porch boards dried, the step held firm, and the house learned a quieter weather. The kettles seemed to sing lower, as if stewardship had lowered the storm's voice. A different letter arrived afterward, this time asking for a seat, not a signature. "Come sit closer, sweetheart. This is the pot. I hope you keep a handful of plain sentences sturdy enough to hold a life." First, a boundary is a promise you keep to yourself in public. It is not a wall against love. It is a doorframe that lets love enter without knocking you down. Write your rules where you can touch them. Mine says, decide in daylight, no signatures at night, and no disrespect where we bless food. When you forget, touch the wood. Homes remember, so do hands. Second, grace is not pretending nothing went wrong. Grace names the harm, fixes the board, and still sets the table for whoever arrives with clean hands and daylight. Sometimes the second plate stays in the cupboard for a season. That is not punishment. That is space for people to choose the kind of company they plan to be. Third, patience is not passivity. It is the slow courage to wait for witnesses and write things down. Paper is not suspicion. Paper is memory you can hold. Keep receipts, keep minutes, keep your own voice on the record, especially when rooms get loud. When somebody offers urgency, ask whether they mean haste or help. One saves time, the other saves names. Fourth, persistence is the grocery trip nobody claps for. You go anyway. You call the office again. You read the line twice. You bring the meeting into daylight and ask for verbs that carry duty. You request the apology in writing, not to humiliate, but to teach the room how repair becomes real. Fifth, Americanness, the kind I believe in, is neighbors, receipts, and a table big enough to hold disagreement without flipping. It is the clerk who taps the math, the pastor who prays with eyes open, the manager who finally says, "She's right." It is little league scores, sharing space with corrections printed in black ink. It is modest hands fixing the porch because the step should have been safe yesterday, and must be safe tomorrow. Sixth, love is not sacrifice that deletes you. Love is service that preserves you. If your kindness requires your disappearance, it is not kindness. It is a stage trick. Real love sets chairs, sets limits, and keeps the light on for the person who learns how to knock. Seventh, waiting can be a prayer when words would only make weather worse. Turn the phone face down. Let the storm finish its paragraph. Choose the name you must live with over the noise that wants to speak for you. Mourning makes better witnesses. Now tell me yours. In the comments, say where you learned to wait with courage. Tell me who handed you a rule that kept your house standing. Tell me which line you plan to tape to your bread tin, and which neighbor you'll invite when it's time to celebrate repair. If this gave you courage, subscribe and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I will be here next Sunday at dusk with another true-style grandmother tale, told plain and honest, with daylight on the paper and quiet, steady peace in the chair across from me. There's one more story this table could tell if you'll sit with me next Sunday. The church bulletin tucked my name between potlucks and prayer lists with a line that read, "Persistence with grace." Small letters, large relief. On Main Street, the manager lifted 2 fingers from his steering wheel and nodded, the way neighbors do when a name has been put back where it belongs. At the market, the new cashier slid a note beneath my receipt, "Proud of you, ma'am," then rang the next customer as if nothing holy had happened. Online, the thread that once gnawed at me softened its jaw. "I spoke too soon," wrote one. "Learning from her," wrote another. A cousin simply typed, "She did right." Hearts tapped like steady rain. After bingo, a veteran tapped the plastic table and said, "Good work," as though I had tightened a shared bolt. At church, the deacon who always misplaces his pencil brought 2 and left 1 with me. Even the neighbor who prefers rumors to recipes waved from her porch and asked about my tulips instead of my business. I clipped the notice from the paper, folded it neat, and set it in the bread tin beside the index card that kept this house standing. I rested my palm on the lid and let the room listen with me. The gutters cleared, the alleys rinsed, voices cooled. People still disagreed, but fewer shouted. That is its own kind of weather. I poured tea, turned the phone face down, and watched the sky remember blue. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Evening forgives the corners again. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and let the room glow like bread from the oven. I set 1 plate at my place and breathe. The second plate waits upright in the cupboard, patient, not punished, available by choice, not demand. The window holds dusk like a steady bowl. Sprinklers tick somewhere down the block, and the porch light clicks on because habit loves company. I rinse the cup from noon and leave it on the towel to dry. Testimony that ordinary is allowed here. Mail rests on the counter until morning, because daylight is the witness that loves me best. The bread tin keeps its archive index card, clipping, apology, on letterhead. A red-tipped tulip petal pressed flat as proof that joy stopped by. I touch the lid and feel steadiness travel up my arm, like a hymn I know by heart. I speak the house rules, not as warning, as blessing. Enter kind, speak plain, decide in sun, eat in peace. I check the lock, not from fear but from respect. and stand at the window long enough to see my face soften into the woman who kept her name. Tomorrow will bring chores. The table will remember how to listen. The chair across from me will wait. The phone rests face down until morning. I turn off the radio, whisper goodnight to the room, and let the light do the rest. Next week, I'll tell you about the postcard with no return address. Tomorrow. Asterisk, asterisk. If this story steadied you, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another true grandmother tale, told plain and honest. Next episode, we open the postcard with no return address, a lighthouse on the front, a single line on the back, and a choice I didn't see coming. Bring your chair, your patience, and your own brave rule. If this gave you courage, come back at dusk, please. Asterisk, asterisk. Subscribe next story at dusk. Be good to your neighbors. Porch lights on. Soft music holds one beat. Fade now.